Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Eddie Nashton's Puzzling Kitchen, where food is riddled with flavor. Today on a new series called Posh Point of View, we are making steak au poivre. The night before, you're going to go ahead and take your steak out of the fridge. I'm using a ribeye, and we are going to remove it from the butcher paper. And for an additional measure, we are going to crumple up the butcher paper to alleviate stress. Next thing we are going to do is we are going to pat our steak dry with paper towels. And the reason why we're doing that is because it allows salt to adhere to the surface of the steak, and it allows for the Maillard reaction to happen a lot quicker when you're developing that crust. Next, I'm going to apply a few hefty pinches of kosher salt to the surface of my steak. And when you're applying salt to any cut of steak, whether it's ribeye, New York strip, or filet, you want it to look like a snow flurry in an empty parking lot. And to those who don't know what that looks like, hey, Texas, remember Winter Storm Uri? Yikes! Make sure you add salt to all 4 sides of your steak. And I know what you're thinking, wait, 4 sides? I thought there were only 2. Well, while there are technically 2, it can be qualified to have 4 sides. The 2 sides you're going to be searing on, and along the bone and along the back cap. Once it's salted, place your steak on a rimmed baking sheet and put that in the fridge uncovered overnight. "24 hours later." I'm taking my ribeye out of the refrigerator and I'm bringing it into a room temperature environment. While it's resting, getting ready to be seared in cast iron, I'm going to prepare the other elements for butter basting and the poivrade. So here's a little bit of some fun trivia for you. The sauce poivrade was added to the list of mother sauces by Jules Gouffet in 1867. Poivrade sauce is typically made with coarsely ground black peppercorns, cognac, and heavy cream. Here I'm using bourbon because cognac is expensive. And I also happen to have enough leftover bourbon on hand to make this work. Yay! Alright, I think we've all come to realize that the meat mallet isn't quite working to crush these peppercorns, so I'm just going to go ahead and put this away, and I'm going to opt to use the cast iron to crush what remains of these peppercorns. And even that didn't plan to work out, so I'm just going to do circular grinding motion with the pestle from my mortar and pestle. Get some nice tappy-tap action going on in there after doing the circular grinding, and then once that's ground to the consistency of your preference, go ahead and just put that pestle away and get out of the small container to set those coarsely ground peppercorns aside. Love saying that sentence, coarsely ground peppercorns. Get a pan preheated over medium-high heat. I'm using cast iron here. Buy a cast iron, it's less than 15 bucks. Next, I'm going to try to carefully get my chef's knife out of the guard, and I'm going to dismantle and dice the shallot. I'm first going to cut the shallot lengthwise to allow me to, after cross-chopping, to get a more fine dice. Yeah, so you can totally forget what I said about having a nice fine dice. This is coming out kind of rustic, and that's okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crush this head of garlic, applying all my weight to the palm of my hand, and I'm going to separate 2 to 3 cloves of garlic for butter basting. So I got 2 cloves that I'm going to crush, and forgot the butter for the butter basting. How silly of me. Getting that out the fridge, and I'm trying to fumble getting that last stick out of there. Jeez. Walking back to my station, unwrapping the half stick of butter. I'm going to leave 1 half stick whole again for butter basting, and I'm using the other half to add butter to my sauce after it's come off the heat. I'm first going to cut it in half lengthwise, and then I'm going to cut it in half widthwise. Be sure to watch your fingers, because it's a very sharp blade. Once you have your butter pieces ready to mount the poivrade, yes, that's what that process is called, grow up people, We're going to go ahead and put it in a container and just set that to the side. Now to check whether or not my pan is ready for me to sear my steak in, I'm going to go ahead and pull out an infrared thermometer. And I wanted to read around 450 to 500 degrees. Right now that was around 565, so that's a little too hot. I'm going to go ahead and take it off the heat and let it cool off like a disgruntled retail employee. While it's doing that, go ahead and give your steak another pat down to dry off any excess water from the salting process. Any leftover moisture will inhibit the crust development on your steak. Making sure to get all sides, and then once you're done with that, we're going to head back over to the cooking station to check the status of our pan. We are right around 498, 500 degrees. I'm going to put on this mitt so I don't burn myself, and I'm going to return the pan to its heating element. Next, I'm going to add vegetable oil to coat the bottom of the pan. With an oven-mitted hand, I'm going to swirl the oil in the pan so that every nook and cranny of the cast iron is seasoned and coated in the oil. Once the oil has been evenly applied in your cast iron skillet, you're going to place your steak in the cast iron pan, and you'll know it's hot enough when you hear this sound. Now, the method I'm going to be using to cook the steak is what's known as the frequent turning method, where I let it sit in the pan for about 2 minutes before flipping it on the other side and letting it sear for another 2 minutes. As I go to flip, you'll see that the first side didn't make as much contact as I'd like it to, which means it's going to be a little bit more gray. That's because I didn't properly package it after buying it at the grocery store. Either that or it didn't blot out as much surface moisture as I should have. Either way, the frequent turning method helps build the crust gradually. In addition to frequent flipping, I'm also changing the orientation of how the steaks are flipped. So for the first flip, I'm flipping vertical to vertical, and from the second flip to the third flip, I'm flipping vertical to horizontal. The frequent turning method also inhibits the development of the gray band around the medium rare cook on the steak. While my steak is developing the crust on the second side for a second time, I'm going to grab a plate so when I pull it off, it has time to rest and accumulate juices and also leftover butter from butter basting. I'm going to go ahead and flip my steak, and I'm going to insert my meat thermometer into the eye of the ribeye, which is the muscle that travels from the head of the cow down to the round. So when we insert this, we are going to start looking at a temperature of around 90-ish degrees, and we want to pull it off at around 115. So I'm going to let that sear for a couple extra seconds, and then once that's done, I'm going to pull it off and I'm going to let that rest. While consulting your meat thermometer, you can also use the touch test to figure out the internal temperature of your steak. Index finger to thumb is rare, middle finger to thumb is medium rare, and the other two fingers, you don't need to worry about those. The steak has been put on a plate to rest. The temperature probe has been inserted to the eye of the ribeye, and it's reading really high for some reason, but you're also consulting the hand poke test to make sure that you aren't going crazy and it's cooked to a more accurate temperature. Next, we are going to lower the heat on our cast iron pan, and we are going to remove it from the heating element because that thing is smoking hot. Distance yourselves. And while it's off the heat, we are going to add butter, let that melt. And we are going to also add our aromatics, our rosemary, thyme, sage, orange peel, and garlic cloves. Please excuse me as I go turn off the smoke detector in my bedroom. And where's the thing? Take a look up to see. Ah, that's nice. Take a look at all that laundry in there. That's kind of disappointing and a little awkward. Anywho, I'm gonna go ahead and add in my garlic and my aforementioned herbs. use them as a paintbrush along the garlic and get the tongs to make sure all those herbs and or spices are blooming and infused. Now place the steak back in the pan and we are going to butter baste for about 30 seconds, but to do that you're going to need a spoon and mitted digits. So tilt the pan back, put it back on the low heating element, put your herbs and aromatics on top of the steak, and begin butter basting. You want to do that for about 30 seconds. You're going to go ahead and again take your steak off after butter basting, and you're going to go ahead and let that bad boy rest. And for extra bonus points, what you can do is you can pour that herby butter on top of your steak while it's resting and get ready to build your sauce poivrade. Add a few knife handfuls of your shallots to your cast iron pan and begin sweating those shallots until they start to become translucent around the edges. Best way to do this is to grab a wooden spatula and just do soft, short scraping motions with your pan. Next, you're going to add your crushed peppercorns to release the oils and get them toasted to add more peppery floral flavor. After that, pour in half a cup of bourbon slowly to avoid big plumages of alcohol vapor. And once the alcohol vapors have evaporated and turned into tiny little wisps, you can go ahead and add your heavy cream. And you can either add this slowly or you can add this all in one motion. Make sure that the cream has been thoroughly combined and emulsified with the bourbon, peppercorns, and the shallots before taking this to an oven and adding the infused basting butter from your steak and the steak juices. So a lot of that flavor is going to be infused with the rosemary, orange peel, sage, thyme, and garlic, which I think really helps the floral fruity notes in the peppercorns. I mean, bright, herby, citrusy butter with creamy pepper sauce, what's not to like? Make sure all the resting juices are incorporated into the sauce. In regards to consistency for the final sauce, what we want is to see the sauce separate and slowly come back together. Once the sauce has reached that consistency, you are going to remove the pan from the heat and start mounting the sauce with butter, which means incorporating a tablespoon of butter at a time until all the butter is emulsified into the sauce. This is a process that cools down the sauce over time with cold/room temperature butter, so I figured I should speed up the footage for you because no one wants to sit here watching me whisk butter for what felt like 5 minutes per tablespoon of butter, so about 20 minutes. I guess speaking hypothetically, you could use this recipe as a basis to make a really good beef stroganoff. Now that I'm thinking about it, that sounds like a really good idea. I need to workshop that. Back to the matter at hand, and my experience of making pan sauces for proteins like pork, chicken, steak, fish, etc., I can't help but think that they are pretty particular and somewhat technical with how they need to be made and in the time that they need to be made for final plating. Once the butter has been incorporated to the sauce, we are going to go ahead and put away the oven mitt and begin carving our ribeye. First off the bone to see how we did, and for the cook on tonight's ribeye, we're looking at a medium rare medium, teetering more towards medium. Oh, thank the Lord, after that temperature scare I thought it would have been so much worse. And next I'm going to remove the cap from the eye, and I'm going to slice the eye of loin against the grain. Even though, for the most part, most steaks on the back of the animal are cut against the grain before being presented at butcher cases and supermarkets. I'm cutting the eye section from the ribeye into 1/4-inch pieces. Any thicker and I feel like this dish is performing an injustice. Too thin and it dries out too quick. And puzzling to say the least, I'm going to go ahead and grab a plate from my cupboard before even thinking about slicing the ribeye cap. Because logic. Gotta make sure I move my phone before I can put my plate down, because I don't want that to break. Alright, now that I've got the plate situated, I'm going to go ahead and try to fan out these eye of loin pieces before slicing the cap into bite-sized pieces and reorienting the steak pieces to the orientation of the steak before it was cooked and sliced, in the hopes of getting a pretty good thumbnail. But then again, I likely messed that one up for me. Oh well, I'll think of something else. Anywho, I'm gonna go ahead and make myself a plate. I'm going to get myself some of the poivre first, get a little half moon shape of that on my plate, and I'm going to grab 3 pieces each of the eye of loin and the ribeye cap. And with the frequent turning method, you can see on each of the slices that it creates less of the infamous gray band around the meat. So kudos to that. I like how I went from being total barbarian to like, wait a minute, let me be civilized and use tongs. And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be a picture for the gram. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.